It's January 12th, 2022. These are like mentions I don't even want to mention. But I mean, again, in the what comes next that I don't even want to really know about and I'm frightened of, I see things that are being portrayed, real live events in my local area. It's not necessarily, it's one of the boroughs within Tri-Borough and the 5 boroughs of New York City. On the television that was portrayed last night, I found solace, honestly, in a message from a Dr. Robert Malone. Then that transitioned into a piece, or before that, and before the Ghostbusters, whatever, as I was flipping around the stations, there's almost like when I was a kid, there used to be a 1-800 number that would flash at the bottom about these impoverished nations and the children that were left there that didn't have food, didn't have medicine, didn't have whatever to raise money for these things. They were constantly asking the North Americans to donate and give money to these things. I saw it all over television as a child in the 1980s. Last night, it was kind of along those lines, but not so like it was more infomercial, less like trying to solicit money from unsuspecting victims. So it was about a specific territory, which I'm not going to mention names. Same territory, apparently. I've seen the flag flying on United States of North American soil along with our flag, which is a problem. And so I thought that that was supposed to be illegal. Like, I thought the United States flag was the only one allowed to fly. But whatever, and I don't know how to, like, get these things resolved. And so then there's a thing about, they said that they're non-familial to me. There's some other genetic line and responsibility. They said that there was they had lost their governance or government, which I didn't know what that meant or how that could be possible. And then they said that they lost their ability to have a monetary system, which logically would make sense if somebody was to teach you about other places in the world. And then it said that they had been found guilty of something and destabilized their own area, so they lost this whatever, which is what led to famine and the medical whatever crisis of some sort, which I understood. But what happens is, if that's the case, then why are there big areas and populations of those specific whatevers that have already been found guilty elsewhere? Why are they not removed from other land places that they may have made landfall on? Because then that poses a risk to people who have a governance and a backed by some form of insurance and an allowance to have a monetary system. The areas that are allowed to have such things because they've done whatever it is that they do in order to earn those things, I'm just confused how the people already found guilty are able to populate elsewhere in an unsuspecting colony, let's call it, imposing on an insured nation with fiduciary responsibility and other things. it just gets confusing for me how and where to stand on how do you carefully and cautiously raise a hand to ask the question and to whom. And does that put my children and myself and my parents in jeopardy, since nobody's made mention that they've been found guilty elsewhere. I caught it on a television program, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and one of the television programs also mentioned 2,200 different identifications in one city, just being New York. Since I don't know how to speak on anywhere else. So that's a large populace, but I don't get news on 2,200 different whatevers while they have feet on the insured nation's certificate of sorts. So it gets a little confusing, again, how to protect myself from the local population and from some other loud funded groups that may be confused with how the real global part interacts with the local part. It's confusing. And then I see there was some tragic fire in New York City. I see one of the Democrats' representatives was out. She has a title in the world of New York general attorney or something along those lines. She was at a candlelight vigil for what looks like something along her more familial lines than, she's closer to her familial lines than my own, in a generalization. And then it pans to the pandemic of hospital workers. And for some reason, on this particular newscast at around 12 o'clock, the hospital workers that they were filming to make their piece of journalism shows familial members that are not of my familial lineage, mostly of big variety of a selection, say, of the 2,200 other identities that are in New York. And it just gets confusing as to how that humanitarian almost credit, because that has a negative amortization schedule. It's become a self-deprecating and dangerous field, because it, in New York at least, grew almost overnight. They took on, I don't know if they're refugees or some type of employment where they took people from outside of New York to hire in some nursing shortage that they said that was created. Meanwhile, there were active, like myself, was ready to jump into school to learn and prepare, but they didn't hire the locals. They went to not even inside country, they went outside the country lines in order to do this mass hiring somewhere around the year between 2000 and 2003, or maybe 4. And that filled the New York healthcare system and hospital system with a lot of different identities, which further pushed myself out of the healthcare field. And then again, it's the college they made really difficult between deadlines of when to apply, how many they're taking in, and so on and so forth. And it just became, it's just, there were so many blocks put up, and it was like almost, it felt like from every angle. Um, but what I don't understand is, where does the priority lie if you have a profile on the monetary system that looks somewhat familial? Your nation was given an allowance of a governing body, and then all of a sudden, people who have already failed or lost their governing body for being guilty of something else somewhere in the world, if they start congregating on your insurance certificate, how do you protect yourself, your children, and your family? And how do you live while this conflict of some sort is going unaddressed or unacknowledged? That's really where I think the heart of the problem is for me at the moment, is all of this worldly fighting and business going on, agreements being made, but the people not learning about them, even though it's on their insurance certificate. And I don't know where to go to find members that would be able to explain this to me. So this way I can protect myself, and I can find an entryway into protecting the insurance certificate that we were granted at some point, and the fiscal allowance that we were allowed with profile. Because yesterday I heard on one of the television spots, which I wasn't addressed or allowed to vote within, I don't know why. It said that there's, on the George Washington front, they're changing 5 quarterbacks to females. One said man killer. I mean, why would you give a monetary allowance or honor a person called man killer? This is our insurance certificate of safety and compliance. I don't understand why there are rewards to people who are killing men from the Isle of Man and from our insured safety group. I mean, it's quite scary when I catch bits and pieces of what the alerts are saying and then thread them together. I mean, there is responsibility. And then I go back to that Patriot movie where there's His Majesty's Kingsmen, and then there's the farmer level wants to help, wants to stay safe, wants to protect themselves, but doesn't know how to interact, because how do you even, I mean, like, they were riding around in horses, and it didn't seem very pleasant when they had an interaction, but again, I don't know what the cinema was trying to portray, and whose political involvement that was, but there are some very scary, like, necessities, I feel like, that are going neglected. Protecting our insurance certificate and monetary system being the number one, and some of this local movement stuff, which I've seen in other states. Just, I am afraid to comment on other people's states if it was just one whatever, but it's frightening. It really is. As one woman with nobody else to discuss things with, I am frightened of what I don't know is what I'm really frightened of. Star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It is Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.